Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. It's okay to not be okay. In today's video we're going to be looking at self-compassion. Do you ever find that sometimes you can speak to yourself in ways you wouldn't dream of speaking to someone else? Sometimes we can be so unkind and so self-critical in our own thoughts. So this video is all about learning to be more self-compassionate, learning to be more kind to ourselves in our own thinking, in our own behaviour. So without further ado, let's get cracking. Have you ever noticed how it can be easier to be kinder to other people than to yourself? Maybe you've noticed that the way you talk to yourself in your own mind, you wouldn't dream of talking to someone else like that. If you had a parrot on your shoulder and it kept saying horrible things to you, you're a loser, you look like shit, whatever it might be, you shouldn't have done that, everyone thinks this of you, you're a bad person, you're unlovable, you're a failure. If you had a parrot saying those kind of things to you, what would you do with that parrot? Would you let it stay on your shoulder and just walk around with it? Or would you want to knock it off and never have that parrot near you? Because how helpful is it going to be having this negative mindset around you all the time? Yet we allow our own minds to have this kind of thought often, and we allow ourselves to talk to ourselves in a way that we wouldn't tolerate from someone else talking to us, and we certainly wouldn't talk to someone else in that way either. So this video is about developing a more kind, compassionate way of talking to ourselves in our own minds, in the same way that we talk to a caring friend. And this can be really helpful because when we're having difficult emotions like depression and anxiety, being a little kinder to ourselves can make all the difference. So firstly, what is compassion? A good definition might be it's the ability to identify suffering and the wanting to alleviate that suffering. Okay? So it's got two parts to it. Noticing the suffering and also wanting to alleviate the suffering. So we can apply this to other people often. When we see them suffering, we can identify it and we want to help, we want to alleviate their suffering. But what about to ourselves? I think sometimes we can identify our own suffering, but often we can be maybe more self-critical of ourselves for having the suffering. You've done it again, you deserve this, and these kind of self-critical thoughts, rather than actually having this this need to help alleviate the suffering in ourselves. And this is important because life is really hard. Life is full of suffering, and that's a very Buddhist thing to say. But from the moment we're born to when we die, we're full of, can be full of tragedy, death and disease and problems and heartache and all these kind of things that are going to come along. So adapting a more self-compassionate way of dealing with our thoughts, can really help with all of that. Think about if you had a minor car accident, for example. You smashed your car and it was a write-off. You weren't injured necessarily, but you were in a car accident. What would you do first? Would you do deep breathing? Would you do thought challenging? Would you do, some meditation? No. The chances are you'd want to phone someone you cared about and who cared about you, maybe a family member or a friend or something, and you'd want to say, this happened and I'm hurting from it and it was awful, okay? And you want them to say, oh, it sounds awful, and show you a bit of kindness, a bit of compassion, because we need that, we yearn it. When we suffer, we want to get that from different people and we want to have that. So this is about learning to do that to ourselves. When we go through something difficult perhaps, or when we're suffering, we want to learn ways to talk to ourselves in a kinder way to alleviate our own suffering.
There are many, many techniques we can use to help build self-compassion, and I'm going to share a couple with you now, and a couple more will be coming up on future videos. But this technique I want to share with you is called the caring friend technique. And basically what it involves treating yourself in the same way you'd treat a caring friend. And it involves speaking to yourself in your own mind the same way that you'd speak to a caring friend. So let me talk you through some examples. Imagine if you had the thought, I'm never going to find love again, I'm unlovable. They're quite common kind of thoughts that people can have. What would you say to a caring friend who believed that they'd never find love again and they were unlovable? What would you say to them? Let's try a different example. Say if you made some mistake and you had the thought, I'm so stupid, I'm an idiot, something like that. Well, what would you say to a caring friend who made a mistake and thought they were stupid? You might say to them, well, you're not stupid because look at all the other things you've done well. This is just one mistake, and everyone makes mistakes. And that's a kind, compassionate thing to do, isn't it? That's what you'd say to a caring friend, perhaps. Or if your friend really was making lots of very serious mistakes, just to say, oh no, you're not stupid, everything's okay, well, that isn't really compassion, is it? Because compassion, if you remember, is about identifying suffering and wanting to alleviate the suffering. So you might say to that caring friend, look, I care a lot about you, but maybe you are making a few mistakes. Maybe there's a better way of doing things. Maybe it might be good to reassess things or learn whatever needs to learn or change something that's going to be helpful to prevent future mistakes being made. And that's got a caring, compassionate element to it too. So this self-compassion thing isn't just about being there, it'll all be okay, because that's not compassion, that's not caring. Okay, so it's about learning to respond to our inner self-critical thoughts in the same way we'd talk to a caring friend. And this applies to behavior as well. So if you're very, very depressed, often what happens with depression is our activity levels reduce, and often we can end up just staying in bed doing nothing all the time. If you had a caring friend who was very depressed and they were staying in bed doing nothing all the time, what would you want for them? What would you suggest to them? What would you do? Compassion isn't about saying, well, if you feel depressed, just stay in bed all day, because you know where that's going to lead them and it's not going to be good. So maybe you'd say to a caring friend, I'm going to come round, I'm going to help you do the washing or help you do something. I'm going to take you out for a coffee. I'm going to do something. And that's what we need to do to ourselves. We need to treat ourselves like we matter, like a caring friend would matter. I hope that makes sense. And once we start treating ourselves like we matter, well, we start to believe it. And while we're on the subject, we have self-critical thoughts, and I think there's this kind of underlying belief that we think if we're critical enough, then it'll make the changes we want to see. So if you imagine that someone's stopping smoking and maybe they have a relapse and have a cigarette and they beat themselves up, I'm such a fool for doing that. The more they beat them up, does that mean they're going to be more successful? Do you ever hear someone say, well, I quit smoking easily because I beat myself up so hard that I never had one again? Actually, what happens when we beat ourselves up, often it's very demotivating and it actually makes us just give in and go back to our old behaviours. So it's really not an effective idea to beat ourselves up, is it? So if you had a caring friend who had that example, if they had a relapse and they had one cigarette, for example, what would you say to them? What would be helpful to them? You can see they're suffering, they've made a mistake, they've done something they didn't want to do. How would you alleviate that suffering? What would be helpful to them? And that's how we need to treat ourselves.
Okay, so I hope you found today's video on compassion-focused therapy helpful. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like, and please share this with anyone you know who could benefit. Maybe someone who's very self-critical as a person or tends to suffer with shame or guilt or depression or anxiety. These kinds of things often go hand in hand with this unhelpful thinking style of being self-critical, and they could maybe benefit from a little bit of self-kindness and a little bit of self-compassion. Couldn't we all? So yeah, if you liked the video, please hit subscribe and stay tuned for more videos coming soon.